Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
All right, hello and welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Bill Rayner, and joining me on this gloomy Sunday afternoon is my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on, buddy?
Billy Raids, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, we're doing pretty good.
Got a little snow.
Yeah, we did. As we record this, we just had our first major snowstorm in, I don't know, a number of years, Sean. I can't remember getting this much snow in a long time. So
it's been a while, Billy.
But as you can see outside my window, it's pretty much melted already because it's going to be 40 degrees, 50 degrees, I think, the next couple of days. So
that was that wet, heavy snow, Billy.
Yeah.
Fun, buddy, shoveling that.
Anyway, all right. So we have a really cool topic today, really interesting topic. But before we get to that, first of all, I just want to thank our listeners and our viewers as we have reached a milestone on YouTube. We have now over 500 subscribers. Next stop is 1,000, and we want to get there.
Let's get to 1K.
Yeah, let's do that a little bit quicker than we did to 500. I think it took us 2 years to get to 500. Let's see if we can do that a little bit quicker to get to 1,000. So if you haven't yet subscribed, please do that on YouTube. Just click that subscribe button and you'll be done. You don't have to, there's nothing to, buy or fill out. You just click a button. So please do that. That really helps us out. And then also, if you want to check out our Patreon page, we are on Patreon. That's Enough Out of You. Just go to look up That's Enough Out of You on Patreon, and we have our link in the description. We do a lot of cool stuff on Patreon. We have an extra weekly show that we have for our Patreons. We have announcements and intel. Premium intel that Sean puts up there. So a lot of cool stuff. Plus, there's a really nice community of our Patreons that chat, and it's just a cool thing that we do.
A lot of good discussions on there, Billy. A lot of good comments, and like you said, a community, Billy. It's really cool. A lot of cool discussions on there.
Yeah, we like to keep it that way. We like to keep it nice and chill and informative. So if you are so inclined, there's a free membership, and there's also paid memberships which start as low as $1 a month. So it's up to you what you want to do, but we would appreciate it if you took a look at least and see if there's anything that you're interested in on our Patreon. So
you do get so much more for a paid membership, Billy. I mean, we do some stuff for the free memberships, but I mean, you can just for $1, you get a lot of information.
Yeah, the Speakeasy show alone is worth $1 a month. I mean, we do a show every week. Sometimes we do more than one.
Sure.
If the mood strikes us, if there's something that happens, we'll throw an emergency Speakeasy in there. But yeah, I mean, those shows are pretty much just kind of off the cuff. We talk about just current events and just stuff that we have on our mind, sports, things like that. So if you're interested, I would recommend checking out our Patreon. And again, we would appreciate it. We love our Patreons, and we really appreciate their support of us. Sean, anything else you want to mention before we get to the topic?
Just, about the bookshop we have and the merchandise store. Anybody could help us out. That'd be great. Even Buzzsprout memberships, if you listen on audio. Anything you can do to help us out. We want to grow the podcast. We got a lot of big time guests scheduled. for the rest of this year and into next year. And we got a lot of designs on where we want to take the podcast, and just keep it growing, Billy. Keep the, like you said, community, Billy. Keep that community growing. I love the community we created, and I love our question episodes. We're going to get, try to do one a month because we had so many questions. I mean, we got about 300 in the pipeline right now, Billy. That we could only do maybe get to like 15 a show because they're so in depth and multi-layered.
Yeah. And that, I think those are, like I said, Sean, I have a lot of fun. I have so much fun doing those. We really, because we've done so many different topics.
They're the best.
Those shows. So just a lot of fun. All right, Sean, tell you what, we'll take a really quick break. And then when we come back, we'll start our topic.
Okay.
DK's Corner has moved. Come see us in our brand new location at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, right across from the Jessup Plaza. Enjoy a brand new menu with hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, delicious breakfast, including breakfast bowls and sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's famous Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos, and still the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. And DK's Corner now has beautiful outdoor seating for the summer. Don't feel like leaving the house? Call DK's Corner for delivery. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. DK's Corner, now in Jessup, Pennsylvania. All right, we are back here. That's enough out of you. And a topic I don't want to say it's a fun topic, Sean. It's definitely
no, it's not. Yeah, it's interesting, Billy. Let's call it interesting.
Interesting. It's a little bit different than what we typically do. We do pro wrestling shows every so often.
And I know mob stuff.
Yeah, and mob stuff. This kind of combines the two.
It overlaps, yeah.
Yeah, this is the story of Dino Bravo. We'll call it the life and I guess mysterious and gruesome death of Dino Bravo, who was, if you remember, was a pretty big time, well-known professional wrestler back
especially in Canada, Billy. He was a big star in Canada.
He was, and even here too in the States.
Sure,
I mean, he
for a
was
while,
at one point he was he was a really, really recognizable talent, especially I think once he bleached his hair blonde and kind of turned heel. Yeah, and I think Jimmy Hart was his manager at that point.
We'll talk all about that. We're going to get into his career, Billy.
All right.
We're going to get into deep, we're going to get into Canadian organized crime too, because it's a topic that I wanted to talk about for a while. And, we got to get into that. But Dino Bravo was born Adolfo Brusciano. He was born in Italy, Billy, and he immigrated to Canada. Okay. So Canada organized crime is really, really, really powerful, Billy. I didn't realize how powerful it is. And they're a lot different than the American syndicate, the American Cosa Nostra, and the fact that, they have no problem killing judges and killing officials and law enforcement, targeting law enforcement, and they're really brutal. And what they have, and I don't know how familiar you are, Billy, with Canada organized crime, but they have what's called the Consortium, which is similar to our commission. And the Consortium is made up of three gangs. And you know what, I'm going to go on this one because it always comes back. It seems like the Irish and Italians, but the West End gang, which is the Irish mob in Canada, who immigrated from the north of Ireland, a lot of them from the north of Ireland and from Ireland. And the Hells Angels 1%ers, and the 1%ers are the ones that, they're involved in organized crime. These guys are hardcore. These guys are no joke, Billy. And then, of course, the Italian mafia in Canada. And when we talk about the Italian mafia in Canada, we're going to talk about two specific families that dominated organized crime, and they get into a blood feud with each other. And that's the Catroni family and the Rizzuto family. And the Rizzuto family, Bill, you're familiar with because there was a Netflix series. The guy from Without a Trace, remember the guy that was in that? He played the actor. He was in that. He's in the movie the guy that played Tiggs from Sons of Anarchy, he's in that. But the Rizzuto and the Catroni family dominates organized crime in Montreal specifically. Now there's crime out through Canada, Ontario, but we're going to focus mainly on Montreal because that's like the epicenter of where the consortium runs out of. Okay. And Catroni, Bill, is where Bravo comes in because Dino Bravo was related to the Catroni side. His uncle was Vic Catroni, who became the boss of the Montreal mob, very powerful. And when you were talking about
now, hang on, Sean. It's not his blood relative, right? Isn't it? Isn't this a relative by marriage?
But you're right.
Okay.
It was true. It was true marriage that he was related to Catronis.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but the thing is, Billy, he became his cousins and everything. Dino would be involved even while he was wrestling. He would get into private security, like he would be in that world bodyguarding for like his cousins who were in the Catroni mob. Okay. So when we talk about that, Bill, we also got to talk about the American Cosa Nostra, because specifically the Bonanno crime family,
right,
and the Buffalo crime family, the Magadino family, and also Detroit had a little bit too in their crews. But the thing about where I didn't realize how powerful Buffalo was, Billy, and at some point I think we're gonna have to do a show on Buffalo. And we'll probably bring in Scott Alfieri because he's from Buffalo and he knows a lot about Magadino and you know a lot of the stuff that went on there, and he could give us a good perspective. But they have it say the Buffalo has a say in what goes on in Canada, and they still do to this day. That's one thing, Billy. The consortium is still active today. We're going to talk about that. And Bonanno family, actually, we're going to explain how the Montreal Mafia was actually part of the Bonanno family for a long time. And the boss of the family was actually considered a capo in the Bonanno family. Okay. So we're going to talk about that because it really gets complex here. How all of that, and it kind of ties into what happens at Dino down the road, where he gets involved with all these people. And so let's talk about the consortium for a little bit, Bill. We'll start with the West End gang, Bill, because at some point we'll probably do a whole show on these guys. They're still active today. Law enforcement said they still have about 200, maybe 250 active members in Montreal, which isn't a lot, but it's still, you know, a pretty powerful organization. They had an infamous boss by the name of Dooney Ryan, and he ran, Billy, a $90 billion drug operation, $90 billion, Billy, for a 15-year period. And
is that American or Canadian? Because there's a big difference there.
Well, I would say they were important all over. I don't know.
No, I mean as far as dollars go.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I mean they were. I don't know, that came from law enforcement, so I'm not sure how they tallied up the total there, because they were important to drugs from all over, Billy. I'll explain the whole operation, what they were doing, but anyway, they had ties, Billy, to Whitey Bulger and the Winter Hill Gang in Boston. They had ties, obviously, to the Irish Republican Army. They had ties to Asian gangs like the Triad and the Yakuza. They had ties to the Dublin mob in Ireland, and an infamous boss by the name of Martin Cahill, the general. And they had ties, Billy, to the Cali cartel. They were the rivals of Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel, and that's where the cocaine comes in. And this huge operation that they ran. And they were just in the news recently, Bill, because the leader, a guy by the name of DeFrost, just passed away at 73 years old, and he was running the West End gang, Bill, out of you're gonna love this, out of a nursing home. And his whole cover was he's just this retired guy, living on a pension, right? And he's in a nursing home, and here he was meeting with all his lieutenants, and they was running the whole operation from the nursing home, but they never
unbelievable.
They couldn't get anything on him, and he just died peacefully, and he was in the news, but they're still very active. So you have them, you have the Hells Angels.
Right.
And of course, with the Hells Angels, Bill, you have different biker gangs. There was a situation with the Quebec gang, biker gang wars that went on there in Canada. We're not going to get into all that today, and then you had the Montreal Mafia. So with the Catroni family, Bill, let's start with Vic Catroni. We'll start explaining him. He actually started, Bill, as a wrestler in the early 1920s, just like his nephew would later, Dino. And then he gets involved in prohibition and different illegal beer sales. And he started working his way up through the underworld, like doing security, like Dino would. But the big event for him is in 1953, Bill, when Joe Bonanno, who ran one of the 5 families in New York on the commission, the Bonanno crime family, he sends his lieutenant. We talked about this in the episode we did on the 5 families. He sends his lieutenant Carmen Galante to Montreal. And basically he sent him there, Bill, to colonize organized crime in Canada. And when Galante gets there, he forms a really good friendship with Vic Catroni, and they become a partnership. And what happens, Bill, is they kind of implement the Montreal Mafia into the Bonanno family, and they make all their soldiers and made guys, and Catroni is made as a capo. So he's technically a capo in the Bonanno family, but he's running all of Montreal. And the biggest thing that Galante did is they formed what's called the French Connection. So they would get opium from like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, and they would smuggle it into Turkey. And then from there, smuggle it to Marseille. And they would have the French Corsican mafia converted into heroin. And then they would smuggle that into Montreal and then into North America. So this is a huge operation, Billy. Okay. And it's all under the Bonanno family. Now, Joe Bonanno at the time, and we talked about this, how he wanted to take out other members of the commission. And then Joe Colombo would turn on him and say what happens, and they kind of banned Joe Bonanno. Okay. And one of the other people besides the rest of the commission he wanted to take out was Stefano Magaddino from the Buffalo Mafia, which was actually his blood relative, a cousin, but they got into it and he wanted to take him out. So anyway, what happens is they kind of, the Bonanno family kind of has a split with Joe Bonanno, okay? But Galante is still powerful. We talked about Galante.
Right.
He would actually just assume in control without being officially made the boss. But what happens inside the Montreal Mafia is the Catroni family gets in a blood feud with the Rizzuto family, okay? And everybody, and it's like a civil war within the family breaking out, okay? And you have the Bonanno people and the Magaddino people in Buffalo, they're kind of, working both sides too to see, they're going to side with whoever wins, Billy. And it turns out the Rizzuto family won the war. Catroni actually would die natural causes, but one of his main guys, Paul Viola, would take over as the boss for a while Catroni was sick, and he would end up getting killed. And then Rizzuto takes over, and first it was the father, and then it was Vito Rizzuto. It was Nico was the father. He would take over first, and then he would pass it on to his son, Vito Rizzuto. And what happens there, Billy, is interesting because at this point, even though all these guys were made men under the Bonanno family, like Vito Rizzuto would be considered a soldier of the Bonanno family, all right? But at some point, with all this going on, Montreal kind of goes independent of the Bonanno family under Rizzuto. You understand? It's kind of complex, but it's like, they're still associated with Bonanno and they're still associated with Buffalo, but now they're not directly under the thumb of Bonanno family. They're their own independent organization under Rizzuto.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's still all kind of wars going on. There's still all kind of, but they have all these operations going on, smuggling operations involving drugs. And we're going to talk about the huge operation with the untaxed cigarettes. This is where Dino comes in. So that's basically your a quick history of organized crime in Canada, Billy. So any questions on that before I?
Well, the only thing I would say, Sean, is I know they have very restrictive gun laws in Canada, right? Much more so than here in the United States.
I do.
I mean, obviously, it's not difficult for if you're in the underground. I'm sure it's not as difficult to get a gun, but it has to still be a little bit more difficult for them to get guns.
Well, normally would, Bill, but they've set up. We're going to talk about this complex smuggling route that they had set up all the way from upstate New York into Canada, into Ontario, Billy. So it would be easy for them. They're smuggling cigarettes. They're smuggling that going back to prohibition alcohol, but they're smuggling drugs. So it'd be easy to smuggle weapons because it's complex routes, Billy, that goes through the Indian reservations. We're going to talk a lot about that because the Indians tie into this.
Okay.
Both sides, the Canada side and the American side, Billy.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, that's a good question, but I mean, it is, with their smuggling routes, it wasn't hard for them to do, Billy.
Right. Yeah.
And like I said, these guys were very capable of killing judges, and they didn't think twice about it, especially the Hells Angels, and even the Italian Mafia, Billy, and of course the West End gang too. They had no problem killing authority figures.
It sounds more like the Cosa Nostra, the Italian mob, the mob in Italy.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, Billy, because remember these guys immigrated from Sicily. So Catroni wasn't Sicilian though; he was Calabrese, and there's always been this kind of rivalry between the Sicilians and them. And Rizzuto is from Sicily, so when they come over to Canada, they do bring a lot of those Sicilian traditions and the stuff that they get away with in Sicily that they never would get away with in America. And it's an interesting word, Bonanno, too. The Bonanno family and the Buffalo family would understand that we can't do these things on the American side, but we could certainly get away with these things on the Canadian side. So right, it is similar to the mob in Sicily and Italy. It definitely, because they bring that influence from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So let's take a break, Billy, and then I want to get into Dino Bravo's career, and then we're going to get into what happened and how he got involved with this really complex cigarette smuggling operation. And he was basically the man in charge.
All right. Sounds good. We will be right back. And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah, and there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, "If we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides." So, I mean, this is great, Billy. I mean, what he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
They're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grains sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy, Tom's philosophy. It's great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. I mean, it's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. Again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right from Tom's farm to your door to your table. So
absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
Absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
We'll start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love
There you go. I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right. Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you.
All right. We are back on That's Enough Out of You. And this is really a crazy story, Sean. I know this is something we've been talking about doing this for a while. We gave you a little bit of background on the Canadian Mafia in our last segment. Now we're going to get into Dino Bravo and his career. So Sean, take it away, because this is interesting.
Yeah, so Dino Bravo is related to Vic Catroni through marriage, And the Catroni name, Billy, still, even though they got into the Rizzuto side and they lost that blood feud, the Catroni name still has a lot of respect. And there's still, you know, the cousins that are involved in the organized crime there, and they're assimilated into the family and they're made members, and so the Catroni name is really respected in Canada, and that's where Dino Bravo, you know, would have his in with getting in with these people. But Dino starts off as a wrestler, Billy, and he was a big guy, but power lifter. He starts off in the 70s, Bill, and you know how wrestling was then. You had all these regions. You know, it wasn't dominated by WWE and you know, WCW. You had the NWA, the AWA, you had the Mid-South, you had the
Right.
Southwest Wrestling, and all these different regions. And he starts out in Grand Prix Wrestling, and he teams up with a wrestler by the name of Dominic DeNucci, and they become the Bravo brothers. Okay. Then he goes to the NWA, which was the precursor to the WCW.
Right.
And then he's involved in Georgia Championship Wrestling, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. And I used to watch all that stuff, Billy, and follow it in the old magazines and stuff. But he really made, you know, and he also becomes a star in Canada, Billy, which a lot of these guys do, like Bret Hart. And you see a lot of them come over, but they're huge stars in Canada. But they come to the United States because they can make more money. So they come over here, and Dino in the late 70s, 1978, he has his first stint in the WWF. And he's a babyface. He's a fan favorite. And he teams back up with Dominic DeNucci, and they win the WWF tag team title, Bill, from Mr. Fuji and Toru Tanaka. And you know, he's gaining in popularity. But he goes back to Canada, Bill, and he goes to Maple Leaf Wrestling, and becomes a huge star there. And he actually wins the NWA Canadian heavyweight title. Okay. And then he goes to the AWA in the late 70s into the 80s. Then he goes to Japan, like a lot of these guys do, because Japan is huge wrestling fans over there. And then he goes back to Canada, Bill. He always seems to go back to Canada because he's, you know, that's his home. He's popular there. And then he goes back to the WWF, Billy, the second stint. And that's about mid-80s, 1986. And
before that, Sean, he went back to the AWA because that's where I remember seeing him for the first time. I think
I knew he was in the AWA in the late 70s into the early 80s, but did he go into mid-80s too, Billy?
He was there in the mid-80s.
Okay.
Him and I believe Rick Martel.
Right, Rick Martel.
I'm wrong about this, but I think him and Rick Martel were tag team champions in the AWA, or at least challenged for the tag team. I can't remember exactly. I do remember seeing the two of them in tag team matches.
I do remember. And him and Rick Martel were really good friends.
Yeah.
But he does go to WWF, Bill, his second stint. And he's a big star now because he's a baby face. He's real popular in Canada. And he was scheduled to wrestle Hulk Hogan, who's the champ now in the face of the WWF, the face of wrestling at this point. Because at this point, Bill, the mid-80s, wrestling is not so much regional now. Vince McMahon has taken over, and he's kind of made WWF a force.
Right.
It's a major force. And Dino Bravo was supposed to have this big championship match with Hulk Hogan over in Canada. And what happened is McMahon nixed it, Bill, because he was afraid that they would cheer Bravo a lot more and boo Hogan. And he didn't want that because Hogan was his guy now. He didn't.
Right.
So when this match is canceled, it kind of changes the whole career direction of Dino Bravo as a wrestler. Okay? Because now he would become a heel. He would become a bad guy. He would not be a babyface anymore. And that's when you talked about, Bill, when he dyed his hair and you know, he had, you know, I remember the one thing. Do you remember the one stint he had where he tried to set the bench press record? It was like 700 some pounds. And
714 pounds.
Jesse Ventura, Jesse helped him up with it because he got, and then he said he broke it. And but Dino was a strong guy. He was like a 550 pound, 600-pound bench press guy. I mean, he was a legit power lifter. But he turns heel, Billy, and you know, his career, it worked for a while for him, you know, but then in the, you know, the early 90s, he starts, because now at this point, you know, he's getting older, he's getting into his late 40s, And you know how that feels, Billy. I don't know how that feels, but you know, in your late 40s, you know, everything's aching. It's hard to, you know, you have a great workout at the gym and next day you're hurting. So it's starting to get to him. But his popularity's going down, Billy, as far as he's becoming like a mid-Carter almost. Would you agree with that? Like he's not the big draw he once was.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It sort of became, I don't know. It was just, yeah, he wasn't really recognized as, you know, as big of a talent as he had been.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what happens is McMahon ends up cutting his contract, cuts him out, and he's kind of just tossed out of the WWF, and McMahon doesn't see any value in him anymore. So what happens is Bravo starts, you know, training wrestlers on the side because he still loves the sport and he's doing that. But he's also been moonlighting Bill as a bodyguard for a lot of his cousins, the Catroni family, now under the reigns of Rizzuto family, the Montreal Mafia. Okay, so this is where Bruno, now we're talking, you know, late 92 into early 93, where Dino Bravo really gets back into organized crime because he was always like moonlighting Bill. He was always in with these guys a little bit. But this is where the big cigarette scandal gets in, and this is where we're going to talk about next. So you want to take a break here before we get into that?
Well, no, we don't need to take a break. But what I did want to mention, Sean, is that and I forget if I read this or if I saw this somewhere. It may have been part of that Dark Side of the Ring, but I know that there was an interview with Rick Martel, and Martel would say how Dino Bravo would always say to him, you know, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm thinking about working with my cousins and doing this. He said, but you know what? I don't want to get into that life. I don't want to drag my family into it. I don't, you know, it's a dangerous life. He said, but sure, boy, you can make a lot of money doing that. And so it was always kind of pulling at him. It was always kind of, you know, he wasn't sure if he wanted to do it. And then, you know, and I think probably once he started, you know, losing his popularity in the WWF and eventually pushed out, it was kind of the only other thing he could do in his life. He really didn't know anything else.
Well, that's true. And the other thing is that he lived a lavish lifestyle. You know,
right.
So he always wanted expensive cars, and expensive house, and spending all kind of money. So he wanted that lifestyle, and he wanted to keep that. So he gets involved with these people. But he would tell you're talking about Rick Martel. He would tell Bret Hart in the days leading up to his murder that his days were numbered.
Yeah, that's right.
So, you know,
so he knew something was coming, you know,
and there was a lot going on, and we're going to get deep into it, Billy. We're going to get into the whole thing of what happened and, you know, how he got involved in this. So let's talk about the untaxed cigarette smuggling scam, Billy, because this was a huge operation, and this was huge money, Billy, because the prices on taxes for cigarettes in Canada was astronomical at the time, and it was very high in the United States too. So this untaxed scam was worth millions of dollars, and the tobacco companies would understand this too, Bill, and they would actually get involved. Executives would get involved with these guys and make money on the side because they realized how big this was. And you would have politicians involved. I mean, this was a huge operation. So what happens is Bravo uses his influence with the Catroni family, the name Catroni, his cousins, moonlighting as a bodyguard, and he gets back in with them. And he purchases a property, Bill, in Champlain, New York. Okay, and it's close to the Indian reservations. And what he does is, you know, him and his cousins, they set up this smuggling route through the Indian reservations because the Native American Indians and the Canadian Indians, Bill, they're all huge wrestling fans. So when Dino Bravo goes to the reservation and says, hey, look, we want to send this smuggling. It's going to be harmless stuff, cigarettes, nothing, you know, not drugs, anything like that. We're going to send them through, and we just need you guys to help us, you know, set up these routes through the Indian reservations. And it was easy for him because he was a hero to the Indians, you know. So they set up this huge smuggling route, and it comes from, you know, it's in Canada, Champlain, or not Canada, New York, Champlain, New York, and it goes right up through Ontario. Okay. And even the property that he bought, Bill, they would even set up a packaging plant there. So they would be packaging these cigarettes there. So that's how huge this operation was. And everybody it's not just the Montreal Mafia. It's not just the Rizzuto family. It's, of course, the Magadino family in Buffalo, the Bonanno family in New York, and the Consortium, because they're part of this. So the West End gang and the Hells Angels are involved in this as well, Billy. And Dino's property is like a way station, and it's this huge smuggling route from New York to Ontario through the Indian reservations, and they're smuggling these untaxed cigarettes. And eventually what happens, Bill, is other stuff besides cigarettes starts getting smuggled. And of course, when you're dealing with like the West End gang, who's dealing with the Cali cartel in Colombia, what do you think's being smuggled? Cocaine.
Right. So, Sean, let's take a step back. I'm not sure if you explained this or not, but the reason that they go through the Indian reservations is that to cross the border?
Well, the route is from upstate New York into Canada, but it's the smuggling route is through the Indian reservation, so they're using that as cover, Billy.
Okay.
And what I'm saying, so the whole route is like covered through the Indian reservations would protect the route.
Right.
Right. So you would be able to smuggle these cigarettes right into Canada from New York. And Dino's property is like the epicenter. Dino's property is like the way station where they're actually packaging them. Okay, they're without tax stamps, so they're sending them through, and then they sell them on the other side. Okay, so but they're using the Indian reservation as cover, Billy.
Right, because Sean, I don't know if you've been to Canada before, but when you cross the border, either way,
right,
it's not that easy to do. It's, they ask you a lot of questions. I mean, it's very similar to, when you cross the border in and out of Mexico. I mean, there are border agents there that are, looking to see if you're doing anything illegal. So obviously, if they're using the Indian reservations, they're not, that's not happening. They can just kind of cross it as they want to, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the reason. It was a perfect cover, Billy.
Right.
Perfect cover. But what happens is, and this is where it really gets interesting for Dino. He starts to kind of have a falling out with the Magadino family in Buffalo. And rumors start to circulate, Billy, that Dino's skimming off the top because everybody's getting a cut of this pie. And Buffalo's not happy with what they're getting, and they think Dino's skimming. And they also think they're spreading rumors that Dino might be an informant, okay? Because what happens is a couple warehouses get raided, okay? And a couple things get confiscated. There's big to-do in the papers about it. And Buffalo's blaming Dino, okay? They're spreading the rumors that Dino's the one doing this. And Dino, at this point, though, he is under heavy surveillance because law enforcement on both sides, Canada and America, understand that something's going on here, and they think Dino is definitely a part of this, Billy. And you have to ask the question: was Dino ever made into the Montreal Mafia? That's a question I don't know the answer to, but you have to consider that because he's the man running this operation. He's the key guy in this, and everybody has a piece of this. The Consortium, Bananos, Buffalo, everybody, and he's the main guy in this. But once law enforcement is on him and they're following him 24/7, they got him under surveillance. And then these warehouses get hit. There's rumors from Buffalo, and that's going to set up what's going to happen on March 10th, 1993, which is the murder of Dino Bravo. So you want to take a break before we get to that?
Yeah, we'll take a quick break and we'll come right back. That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by Casa Quattro Winery, featuring over 20 flavors of wine, from dry red, dry white, and fruit for your sampling pleasure. Casa Quattro Winery offers entertainment, parties, and private events. Now serving a full menu with a little something for everyone, including appetizers, salads, dinners, pizza, and desserts. Casa Quattro has some of the best live entertainment in the area, with comedy and karaoke nights and live bands. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for all of our upcoming events. And if you mention the code OUTA, that's OUTTA, you get 15% off of your order. Located on Main Street in Peckville, Pennsylvania, call 570-382-3699 3855 for more information. And we thank Case Quattro Winery for their support. Final segment here on That's Enough Out of You. We are talking about the gruesome murder of Dino Bravo, which happened back on March 10th, 1993. If you're a wrestling fan who maybe, may have been a casual fan or, just kind of a fan when you were a kid back in the 80s and you ever wondered, hey, what happened to that Dino Bravo guy? Well, we're about to tell you, and it's not pretty.
No, it's not pretty. So March 10th, Dino, his wife and I believe his daughter leave the house, and they don't come home until after midnight. And when they come home, they would find Dino's body. Okay. And he was there, obviously, with somebody he knew and trusted, because there's no forced entry into the house. He was sitting there watching a hockey match, Billy, with somebody who presumably was a friend. And we always talk about, Bill, who's the one that kills you?
Right.
Like, so he was in a lounge chair. He was calm, cool, and collected, Billy. He was very comfortable. Whoever was there with him, they were watching a hockey match, and he was hit with 17 bullets, Billy. And it was so bad that there was speculation in the papers, and the legend became that the hitters actually wanted to kind of put a happy face in the back of his head with the bullets. Right. How bad this was. So this was like a message job, Billy. It was definitely overkill the way they hit him. And he's in his mansion, he's sitting there in his lounge chair, and it comes back to that raid. That raid on the warehouses was only like 10 days before. And you got to ask yourself, with that going on with law enforcement, with the rumors in Buffalo, it had to be somebody that because Dino's radar has to be up at this point, right? He's understands, he's in that life. He's got to understand that,
right,
possibility. He's telling Bret Hart that somebody, his days are numbered.
Right.
Yet here he is in his house watching a hockey match in his lounge chair with somebody. So whoever was in there was very comfortable, Billy. He was very comfortable with. And his wife, like I said, his wife and his daughter come back after midnight. They find him in the lounge chair. They call the police, and there was different caliber shells found. There was a large sum of money found in his house. And the interesting thing is, Bill, with 17 shots, one of the windows was shot out. Nobody heard nothing, though. The neighbors didn't hear anything. So you got to ask yourself, was silencers used? And
yeah,
you got to ask yourself, did somebody let him in the house? Let the hitter or hitters in the house? Because with the different type shells, was there two different weapons, or was there one assailant using two weapons?
Right.
We don't know, because we have no evidence of forced entry. We don't know how many people were in the house. So there's a lot of unanswered questions, Billy, with this gruesome murder. But there's no doubt that it was an organized crime hit. Now, theories on who did it, Billy. Of course, there was speculation that the wife might have been involved. I never seen any evidence of that. I think just in these cases, they always look at the spouse first. But I've never heard anything, any motive, anything that she would be involved with this. The other suspects would be like the Indians on the reservation, but do they really have a motive? Like, I can't see them doing a violent hit like this. Of course, the West End gang and the bikers, but was Dino close enough with them to let them in the house? I don't know. I don't think so. And then, of course, you have to ask yourself, the last suspects would have been either the Montreal Mafia, the Bonanno family, or the Buffalo family. And my answer to that, Billy, is think about where did Dino's problems start? Where did they originate? They started in Buffalo. When Buffalo started those rumors, and Buffalo wasn't happy, they thought he was skimming, and they started the rumors circulating that he was an informant. So to me, I would look down that road that Buffalo was involved, and they were the guys. Now, the problem is, though, it had to be somebody that was super close with him, and that would have had to been somebody in the Rizzuto Catroni family, the Montreal family, because like I said, his radar's up, so he knows something that he's a target. But
Right.
yet he's sitting there comfortably with someone watching a hockey match.
Yeah.
So,
And you have to wonder too, Sean, you said his wife, the speculation could have been, you wonder maybe if she was warned or somebody told her, because if she didn't come home until after midnight, I wonder how unusual that was.
true, but all this was investigated, and nothing ever came up with the wife. Nothing. There was nothing ever that they could find. Maybe, and again, Billy, if you got to remember another thing is Dino's relationship with the Catroni family's true marriage to his wife.
Right.
So yeah, that's a good point. That maybe somebody in the Catroni family did reach out to his wife, one of her relations. So I guess that's a possibility. There's just no evidence. It's just speculation.
Right.
To me, I think this whole thing had to be set up by Buffalo because they were the ones that had the biggest problem with Dino. But the thing is, it would have to be somebody in the Catroni that would carry it out because it's always your best friend, and he was just comfortable in that chair, and then somebody either got up and shot him or left the door open, and somebody came in, but because there's no evidence that there was any forced entry or anything.
Right. Yeah, and you just wonder. I know I read the speculation that could have been just somebody sitting there with him, said, you know what, I'm going to the bathroom, got up and came back and just started shooting him in the head.
Started shooting. Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. But it was a gruesome murder, and it just shows you, Billy, that his career just when the problem is that he had a great career, but he wanted to keep the lifestyle that he was living. So in order to do that, since his career was over, he had to keep that money flow coming in. So he gets involved with his family that was involved in organized crime, and he gets involved with a lot of these bad people. But the thing is, he was a central figure in this. He was the main figure in this cigarette smuggling scam. It was his property, was the epicenter of this whole thing, and he was the guy that set it up through the Indian reservations, and he was the main guy, and he was cutting everybody in. Everybody was getting a cut, and when people started to not be happy with what they were getting, they thought he was skimming and started to have problems, and that's an easy way you get killed in that life, Billy.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you're, 280-pound wrestler.
No, you're not going to stop 17 bullets.
No,
it doesn't matter how much you bench press, Billy. When you're
right.
But the thing is, he was making a lot of money. He was involved with that, but there was no evidence, Billy, that he was an informant. Law enforcement never came for. As a matter of fact, they denied it that he was ever an informant. But again, Buffalo was convinced he was, or maybe Buffalo just started those rumors because they wanted to give Dino problems. Maybe because they wanted to take over the whole operation, Billy. And the interesting thing, Billy, is that smuggling route obviously was after this, it was disbanded, and law enforcement took it apart. But that structure is still in place today, Billy. And there was a recent court case where a huge smuggling operation was just busted. And it was interesting because it was the Rizzuto family, it was the Buffalo family, the Magadino family, and it was the Outlaws biker gang. So the Hells Angels were cut out. The West End gang was cut out. And the Bonanno family, New York, was cut out. So that was interesting, unless they just didn't have evidence their involvement. But
Right.
That's why I said Buffalo is really an important family, Billy, that doesn't get talked about a lot. And we should probably do a show on them somewhere down the road and see if Scott Alferrari wants to come on, because that's important. But that's where I would say Dino's problem started with Buffalo, and that would be my prime suspect.
And you have to think, Sean, I mean, what he did by their standards must have been really bad because, like we talked about, he was a hero in Canada. I mean, whether babyface or heel or whatever, he was very well known in Canada. So yeah, think this was going to be something that would be heavily investigated,
Right.
Be in the news, and people would be interested in what happened. So there was a lot of risk involved in taking him out.
There was, Billy, but again, it goes back to the difference between Canadian organized crime and American, where they tend to be more, like you mentioned earlier, the Sicilian mafia or the Italian mafia in Italy and Sicily, where they're not afraid to take out law enforcement. They're not afraid to take out celebrities. They're not afraid of the risk it's going to bring them. They don't care, you know. So, and that's the thing. And this was a brazen, you know. And just think of the overkill too, Billy. You have to consider that because
Crazy.
this was a message job too. It wasn't just we're going to take him out. I mean, 17 shots. He was dead after the first one.
Sure.
I mean, so this was a message job. So it had to be somebody, you know, that really felt he was skimming or he betrayed them. You know, and they really felt he was an informant, or there was a definite message job to this hit. That's why I don't think the wife was, you know, but like you said, maybe through her family relations, somehow they got to her, because it is a question that has to be asked, you know, why she was out to midnight. Is that normal to keep your young daughter out to midnight?
Right. And maybe she was, you know, maybe she was just told, hey, don't go home until such and such a time or whatever.
Possibly. But that would be pretty ruthless to tell her knowing what she's going to find when she gets there with a young daughter, right? But again, that's the way these guys were. He got involved in a lot of bad people, and you know, but this was a huge operation he was running, Billy, and they were making a ton of money. You know, I haven't even heard a figure. Like I've heard different figures, but they can't even put an exact figure on how much these guys are making, because they were hijacking trucks of cigarettes too. They were using their own, you know, their own manufacturing, because like I said, he had a plant there right on his property that he owned, you know, and just, this was a massive operation, Billy.
Crazy.
And this also, you know, I mentioned a little bit earlier, but the tobacco companies found out about this, and instead of breaking it up, the executive said, you know what, they're going to do this anyway. We're going to get involved. We're going to get our cut. So they got their cut.
Yeah.
And the politicians, because one thing I didn't mention, Billy, is how Buffalo was really politically connected. And hopefully we do an episode, we could talk about how they were really connected with the Republican Party and the GOP, Billy. And some of their main members were very high up in organizing GOP campaigns and stuff. So they're very powerful politically. And on the other side, you know, Catroni and Rizzuto, the Montreal Mafia, always had political connections. They always used different parties they would be involved with, and different politicians they would have on their payroll. So there was a lot of people getting a cut of this, and a lot of people making money on this huge operation that Dino was running. So there was a lot of motives. There was a lot of people out there that could have been unhappy with him, you know. So, but I would say, you know, for me, prime suspect is Buffalo.
Well, I'm not gonna argue with you, Sean.
But I mean, I don't think we'll ever know, Billy.
It's one of those unsolved things that, you know, we'll never know. But it's just a warning to stay away from that kind of stuff. Sean, but before we end today, I want to, you know, we're talking about the cigarette smuggling. Explain to me, because I know, you know, this happens here in the States too. Something about putting the stamps on the packs of
there's a high, the taxes are super high, Billy.
Right.
So you would have to pay a tax they put a stamp on it. So when you're selling it to like stores and stuff, Billy, like huge stores, they would buy in bulk.
Right.
This way they would pay the tax up front, and then they go out and they charge the people. But if you have an untaxed, you know, fake stamps or whatever they put on there, and they're packaging these. Remember, Bill, they're packaging these cigarettes. So they're skipping the tax part of it. So these are untaxed, Billy. So they're giving it to stores, taking it in bulk, they're selling it, and they're making a ton of money on that, and they're not paying the tax on it. You understand?
What do the stamps signify that they've been?
That the tax was paid.
Okay.
But when they buy it in bulk, that the tax was paid.
Gotcha.
But they're not paying the tax. They're not paying it. So they were skipping this whole process, Billy, which is huge money, because the taxes were ridiculous in Canada, especially in Canada. They were extremely high. So when they're smuggling these cigarettes into Canada, I mean, talk about the profits you're making, Billy. You don't have to worry about the tax. It's already paid technically because you have the fake stamp, but it's really not. And it's all profit, Billy.
Right.
Profit. They were making, and this was huge money back then. And then, of course, through these complex routes, they get involved in cocaine smuggling. You know how much money you're going to make in cocaine. And like we talked about with guns, that's how they were getting the guns in. So there
Sure.
was a lot, it wasn't just cigarettes there was a lot of contraband was going through here. So this was a huge operation. It was all sold on the black market, Billy. So it's just a huge operation. And Dino was the man. He was the man running this. And it
Amazing.
comes from, the Catrone he had the respect, and he had this connection through family, through marriage. And this is how he got in with these guys. And his cousins vouched for him. He did all these years moonlighting, bodyguarding for them. And it was a well-respected name, and he got in with them. And once he buys this property, Bill, he was one of the brains behind this whole thing. Like he came up with this scheme, Billy, and it was his idea to go to the Indian reservations and bring the Indians in to be able to smuggle these through these routes. He's so popular with them. It was easy for him to do. So he was the brains, no doubt about it. He was the brains.
Yeah. So I mean, he really must have done something terrible, because they wouldn't just give that up.
Sure.
Because
Sure.
essentially once they killed him, that was it. That was the end of
Everything fell apart. Yeah,
Yeah.
they was going to. So yeah, I mean, it had to be something bad. He had to, but it. And you talked about earlier, Billy, how Dino got involved with these people, and he was involved with his family, and he was so addicted to that lifestyle, Billy, of this lavish lifestyle, spending this, ridiculous amounts of money and fancy cars, and once his wrestling career was over, he had nowhere to go. He had nowhere to go. He had no, like you said, there was nothing else he could do but be a gangster.
And that's the case with a lot of these guys. They just do it. This is what they've known their whole lives. They don't have skills to do anything else. A lot of athletes go through the same thing. They just, they were doing whatever they'd been doing since they were, young, and really didn't know anything else. And unfortunately, a lot of guys end up in tragedies. Certainly not like this, but some of them just, end up getting involved in drugs. And
Wrestling was a tough business back then, Billy. It's not like you had a pension plan or you had, insurance, and you had to deal with injuries, and
right.
it wasn't like the other sports, and a lot of them, like athletes have all these, endorsements and everything else, and once a wrestler's career is over, it was, pretty much over. That's it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you're a guy like Hogan or
Right.
whatever.
Of course. So one of the big top guys.
And that's why he killed the union deal with
right.
Jesse Ventura. He didn't want
Jesse.
to perform, because he was making huge money, and
Right.
others aren't making what he's making, and he doesn't want to see anybody else cut in.
Oh, well, it's a terrible story, Sean, but a very interesting one nonetheless. So, all right. Well, we thank you for doing all that research, and
we're gonna have to come back on Canada, Bill. Like I said, we're gonna have to do the West End gang. We're gonna have to do Buffalo down the road, So we'll be touching on Canada again, and we'll probably eventually do the Sicilian mob in Sicily and Italy, to Dragata and Camorra. We'll probably have to do all of that.
Definitely. Yep. All right, Sean. Well, listen, we're on Facebook. We're on
Twitter.
I don't know what else. Where are we?
Twitter, Instagram,
all the socials. YouTube. LinkedIn. Go to our YouTube. Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a follow, give us a like and a subscribe, and comment on it. What do you think about this? What are your memories of Dino Bravo if you were a wrestling fan back in the day? And did you even know about this? Did you know that that his life ended this way? Very interesting. We'd like to hear what you guys think. All right, and who do you think did it? Who do you think was responsible for it, for his demise? All right, Sean. Good one, and we'll talk to you next time. That's enough out of you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane, and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it. That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.